Hey everyone, welcome to week 9, day 3. Our theme for this week is nighttime, night. We're trying to define what happens during the night. And we did a very, nightlife painting with that very, very red tint of that portrait of a friend, Daniel, that has that really nice abstract kind of cigarette smoke coming out of his mouth, traveling through his face, and then this kind of sweet explosion on top of his head. We did that. Then yesterday, went back to my mother's house and actually tried to understand how that interior is affected by the lack of natural light. So there was a ton of light sources just kind of bouncing around, flooding the space. It gave me a chance to work on super nice hues, like the saturation of hues. And I think I'm getting to be more sensitive to those hues now that I've done these past 2 paintings. So I think I'm going to push that through this week. Today we're going to do a very cool dominant painting of a painter friend of mine, Gabriel. So let's see how that goes, and let's see if we can speak about night and also speak about pushing the saturation of those hues. Okay, day 3, let's get started. I wanted to revisit portraiture because I felt that I could probably get out a ton from concentrating on what the more natural hues of nighttime would actually feel like. So there is a sense of coolness, being that the moon is reflecting a lot of bluish white light. I wanted to see if I could really push the hues in that palette. For that reason, and I'm going to be a little more technical today than in other paintings, a lot of you have suggested that I describe the painting process a little bit more. I actually think that the discussion that is also part of the creative process is quite important. But if you guys enjoy me talking about the making of the painting, that's super, super cool. I can do that also. So because I wanted to try and see if I could push those hues, particularly those cooler hues, I picked a palette that would give me the possibility to saturate and really punch up those hues, to really concentrate on the chroma of those particular hues. So I went with titanium white, bismuth yellow, cad red, alizarin crimson, cobalt blue, and raw umber. So I have one yellow, which is very saturated, one yellow green, which is very saturated. I have my 2 reds, but I'm probably going to use a lot more of the alizarin today just to concentrate and push the coolness of the palette. Every time I'm going to use cadmium, I would actually kind of sacrifice a little bit of the temperature for that saturated red-orange. So I'm probably going to use a lot of the alizarin today instead of the cad red. But I did want to have that cad red to sort of offset some of those greens a little bit more. I also picked one blue, which is my cobalt blue, which in my mind is like my saturated blue. I know there are other blues that have super high chroma, but to me, cobalt is just enough for what I want out of my palette. And I picked raw umber so that I would have the chance to gray down my mixes without relying on complementaries. So if I didn't want to shift my hues, I would just use my raw umber to do that, which is like natural earth tone. Just to describe the painting process, I very, very quickly went for that greenish, bluish undertone to the face. And because it is an indirect lighting condition, I don't have a ton of masses of light and shadow. It's just going to be form described by changes in hue. So it was very, very important to go for that bluish greenish undertone for the whole face. And as it turns, they become a little bit warmer. Again, not super warm, warmer within the coolness that I want to depict. It was very, very important for me to try and say portrait and to give a very specific mood to the portrait very, very, very quickly. So it was really, really relevant to the painting that I would mass in that darker shape that's at the bottom, just give it this kind of deep, winey, red-violet umber color, just to give it like a very, very solid base. And for then to have the colors try to describe form, like I said, many times we rely on our ability to understand how form turns, specifically when it's being hit by light, when light actually traverses form. So that's what we describe, how light is actually creating this path. And in the description of this path, we can actually say it has peaks and valleys. And those peaks and valleys can eventually configure what is a nose or a mouth or any other feature or any other form that is our subject matter. But in conditions like these, where if you really squint, you realize that the value of that very purple background, which I'm pushing a lot to, is actually quite similar to the values that are within the face. So in lighting conditions as this one, what you're getting is actually a very muted, almost imperceptible notion of form. So if it wasn't for these shifts in colors, we wouldn't really be able to associate the manner in which form turns. So it's very important in these sort of paintings to pay like special attention to wherever we sense a hue change, a temperature change. In my case, I wanted to do this, that we push this. The chance to communicate forehead, let's say, relies upon me putting that super saturated green on that upper part of the forehead and then having it gray down as it turns towards the left. So that nose is actually, if you really dive into the shapes and the colors of that nose has 20 some odd little brush marks that correspond to highly specific hues. And I wanted to see if my painting doesn't have to rely on the way form is traditionally described. One of the things that us, more traditional painters, one of the things that I think we lack is that whenever we encounter a condition of light that is foreign to the one that we trained ourselves with, we feel very insecure. When we get conditions like these that really challenge you and that make you have to rely on other qualities that your painting may have, I think that's where we can come up short. And instead of just encountering these challenges like head on, what we try and do is avoid them entirely. Light is not traveling through form in this case as it would in a very traditionally painted painting, especially not the direction in which it travels, which is our light source always tends to be, it doesn't mean that it has to be, but tends to be above us. So in this case, I couldn't rely on all the things that I know about form, about how form is just naturally described, but the manner in which this nighttime, this very diffused interior sense of night is telling me, yeah, this is the way form should be described. And while I was doing this, I did many things, in particular one of them, but I did many things that I usually don't do. Like I've been just drawn to leaving my marks, my brushstrokes, my color decisions just be during this week. And I think I am more so than every other week because the lighting quality is so different from the one that I'm used to painting that it feels a little bit foreign. So in a way, I have to pay even more attention. And perhaps those hues that under other lighting conditions I would subject to my knowledge, to my experience, because I think I know how to interpret them. In this case, I have no sense of how to reference them. I'll just pay attention to them. So if I see something and say, wow, that's a very saturated green, that's a purple, I'm going to push that. If I really feel the quality of something being purple, I'm going to really push that. And one of my favorite moments in this painting has to be that ear that as I blocked it in, I thought, I'm always going to get back to it. I'll get back to it. I'll get back to it. But the truth was I blocked it in and then went for my, what I think is more hierarchical in the painting, which would be the features. And as soon as I was getting those developed, I started noticing the play that this ear was having with the rest of the face, particularly the fact that it had this yellower tint to it. So it was the only place in the painting that wasn't being totally affected by this, kind of bluish, purple, greenish, cool light. And then when I surrounded that ear with that purple, when I noticed that it was yellower than everything else, I was like, oh wow, I think I'm going to have a moment in the painting that's going to be super cool because I'm just going to have this contrast of complementaries there that may work really, really well. Just the simplicity of the blocking of that ear and the color choices that were so direct against the rest of this painting, I loved. And I loved that it was just direct. I didn't touch it. I didn't have to do anything with it. It says a lot about a painting when you when you kind of hit a moment that you're not really expecting it. But I mean, you have to be in tune with your painting, but you suddenly just hit this perfect relationship. Perfect, not in terms of it being a perfect painting, but perfect for your painting. It's incredible how the economy of brushstrokes can sometimes be exactly what you're looking for, and you don't need to look further. I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to trust myself and say, I should let that be, and I should just not want to develop it the way I usually develop paintings, but I should just notice it and say, this actually deserves to be simple and deserves to be clean and pure against this whole rest of the painting, which I don't think it's labored, but I think it's what I would traditionally do as an effort to model a portrait. So I actually like it, and I think that I was able to recognize those things because I'm putting myself in a condition, in this very, again, vague, cool lighting condition that blends everything together, except for, again, darker accents, which are the sweater in the bottom, his beard, his mustache, the brows, and the dark of his hair that I was actually trying to frame it so that it would be inside the painting, but then at one point I was like, no, I have to make stuff a little bit bigger. So I actually like that it gets cut off up the top of the painting. These moments, these accents, they are going to be there and they're going to help me describe the form a little more easily. But in a way, if you can try to take those away, what you're left is with this almost single value that just changes and shifts in hues, and sometimes in just tiny moments where saturation is being punched up. So there's a little bit of chroma. So because this is such a different way of painting for me, I think it makes me be a little more alert to the possibilities that present themselves throughout the painting. Because in a way, that's what this whole project is about. It's about finding possibilities, finding exciting new roads that your painting can walk through. And so in many ways, I think that the painting was tough to paint because it was foreign. It was this very strange, again, very vague light. But it suddenly became about a moment of purity and simplicity where I said, oh, that yellow ear could be against a punched up high chroma blue-violet, and that tiny moment, that relationship can be fantastic for this painting. It can just be like a moment that makes you smile. What I got was the idea that I need to remember that sometimes economy can be powerful. I guess that's it. That was it for today. Oh, we didn't talk about painters, and that's super important. When I saw this ear, I thought about one painter and one painter alone. And I'm so sorry. I'm from Wisconsin, and there's a town in Wisconsin that actually has his last name, and I actually have no idea if I'm going to pronounce it properly. So I'm probably going to butcher it. If you guys know the correct pronunciation, you can put it in the comments below because I don't think I do. It's Anthony Kadahi, maybe, or Kudahay. I know that I'm close. Let's call him Anthony, like I actually know him. But Anthony's a terrific painter. He's absolutely brilliant. He concentrates on these bigger relationships of color and how those relationships of color eventually just configure these very simple representations of people charged with energy, because it's not just the color relationships inside that one human form, but once he puts it against another being, then the interaction between those two highly specific beings is just magical. It's almost like they were universes in and of themselves, and they just kind of met and sometimes collide. And I just think he's one of those contemporary figurative painters that is just a joy to watch. So him, let's look at him for today, because I think that little ear, even though I can't paint, like him, he can paint circles around me. But that little ear just reminded me of wonderful stuff he does. I think that was it for today. I'll see you guys tomorrow for our 4th day in this night painting week. Bye.